Hello, welcome back. I'm here to do another video today. Let's see. I guess, let me just check here. Yeah, it's it's May 17th today. And the topic for today's video is going to be the T-Square between Mars, Pluto, and Jupiter. And to describe what's going on, Mars is still in Cancer at the time I'm making this video, but in a few days from now, Mars will ingress into Leo, and once it's in Leo, we'll have a sign-based T-square, but if you go by orbs, this T-square is already active, so you should already be feeling it, basically. But it'll only be in fixed signs once Mars makes its ingress. We just had Jupiter make its ingress into Taurus just recently. And so there's a Jupiter-Pluto square going on. And the guy that I got my training from, Adam Elenbaas, did a great video on the Jupiter-Pluto square. And that's kind of, there's so much about this where, you could get so much from just watching Adam Elenbaas's videos that maybe my videos may even be kind of redundant, but I'm still feel like I have some thoughts about this to contribute that he didn't go over. Now, so where could I start with this? First of all, maybe it's best to look at some of the technical details here. One of the things that I learned from Adam Elenbaas, if you apply some of these traditional Hellenistic astrology techniques, is there's a principle called overcoming, right? And if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on with this T-square, it's important to consider this principle of overcoming. What this means is that from the position of, once Mars is in Leo, the Jupiter in Taurus is going to be in an overcoming position relative to Leo, which also is another names for this is upon the 10th or being decimated. So Mars in Leo will want to behave like Mars in Leo, but it's held in check by Jupiter, which is in Taurus. And then if you also consider this, that we've got Pluto retrograde in Aquarius at the 0 degree, that from the position of Taurus, Aquarius is the overcoming position relative to Taurus. So this means that whatever Jupiter wants to do right now, it's held in check by Pluto. So, and there's this kind of thing where Jupiter may well have all these grand plans and grand ideas for Jupiter and Taurus, but Pluto's there kind of taxing it almost, which is kind of like, decimating an army is like striking an army, like every 10th person in an army is removed or whatever. Or killed but we won't get into those gruesome details of Hellenistic astrology. The taxes are bad enough for people these days, right? I'm just kind of joking, but and then, so that gives us the squares between Mars, Jupiter, and Pluto. There's also an opposition that's going to happen, or already is happening, but it'll perfect once Mars makes its ingress. And an opposition is different, like a square is 90 degrees, and an opposition is 180 degrees. And the opposition represents something different, whereas in the square, one planet has an advantage over the other planet, but in an opposition, it's like they're just looking at each other dead on, and there's not like it's not like Mars or Pluto has the edge over each other, right? So when I was contemplating this, I might end up making a jump to some more of my philosophical or theoretical things, but the basic principle here is that Jupiter, as I often said, is a teacher. Jupiter has a lesson to teach, but it's held in check by Pluto, and Pluto often stands for things like taboo, secrets, hidden power dynamics, things like that. And then Pluto is squaring off again, or not squaring off, it's in opposition to Mars. And so Mars is obviously the god of war, stands for all this sort of testosteronal, hormonal, aggressive kind of stuff, right? So you've got these dynamics really going right now, and now where do I jump into this? One of the things that Adam Elenbaas was talking about in his video was things about cults, right? And I think there is something about Aquarius, which really, whether that's the age of Aquarius, the coming of the new age, all of this, and Pluto standing for secrecy and power dynamics. There's something about Pluto in Aquarius squaring Jupiter and Taurus, that does resonate very well with these themes. And I was thinking, what would be the most appropriate way for me to address this in a video? And I decided it would be better not for me to try to single anybody out and drag anybody through the mud or make, that's not the point of what I'm doing with these videos. But to acknowledge that some of these problems are problems that can arise, and it's something to watch out for. But there's different sides of it. One of those sides of it is that I think that, if anything, I think we may be too hard on our teachers a lot of the time. And when there's all this stuff going on with the Dalai Lama recently, that was in the news, I don't want to make any statements where I'm defending or I'm trying to justify or acting like I even know what I'd be talking about, right? But the thing is, it seems so tough that, like, people, on one hand, people complain about cancel culture and all this, but on the other hand, it's like, we can't even have, nobody is let off the hook for the tiniest thing, or whether you want to make a big deal out of it or not. It's like, even if people have done things which are legitimately wrong, or that are things that people shouldn't do, that we have to kind of like we have to seal them off inside like a jail cell or like a radioactive vault of like toxic material. Like, we can never talk to these people again, and we have to, we become so polarized where people can go from being like, a fanatic for somebody like J.K. Rowling and like collect all the Harry Potter stuff, to being like, oh, now we're gonna have to burn all our Harry Potter books, and we're gonna and not even that I even feel that strongly about that particular issue, but it's like, this kind of polarization often comes in with Pluto, where you can either be a fanatic follower of something, or you can become a zealot, against the same thing, and that whether or not, and the problem about this is that you can be a fanatic follower and completely dismiss any of the bad stuff that's there, and turn a blind eye from it, so that you can be a complete fanatical devotee for something or whatever, and not see any of the bad stuff. Or else you can be completely opposite. You can get your flaming sword of justice and go after the evildoers, but completely lose that maybe this person actually might have a teaching or something that to offer that is beneficial to the world, despite their indiscretions, despite their mistakes, despite their sins, and all this kind of stuff, right? And I just think that there's something crazy, and with Mars that's the problem with Mars, is that Mars is gonna just add a lot of like this masculine, macho, chest thumping and belligerent nonsense, which we don't need necessarily. But it's something to watch out for in this dynamic, right? And but the thing is, it's like, I don't think the problem about the two sides of this is that I don't think you can really get out of it so easily. But I just saying that I don't think you don't have to be perfect to be a teacher, right? We have this weird situation where people who probably are not saints themselves, people who, like, everybody's human, and yet we're expecting some person, I'm not going to listen to this person unless they are completely, like this cartoon version of what a saint is supposed to be, because I know best, right? And because I've got the super ego that tells me what a perfect person is supposed to be like, and anybody who doesn't fit my idea of what a perfect person is, I'm not going to listen to them. And then meanwhile, I'm just going to be an inflated narcissist, running my own show and not being held accountable for any of my own bullshit, right? So that's just, I think that's what I'm getting from this certain transit, right? And there's also this thing to watch out for, is how the mind makes strategies of everything, right? And I don't know. I've written down a bunch of notes here. Like, there's something. Okay, I'll just go with this one. There's this thing where I have to admit that I was in a documentary, I only had a very small part of it, called Emerging Proud, right? And it was all about the spiritual emergence stuff. And one of the things about that was that I was arguing for not medicating the different states you get into that are labeled as mental health problems, because they can have a transformative potential And the things I had some issues with this thing because they went on and made like a page for me and called me Transformed Dan, and at that point in time I was probably not even like very through my transformation, or it's like an ongoing process, and I'm just like I don't really feel comfortable labeling myself as being transformed or whatever, right? But one of the things, and I just are being on board with somebody else's program where they have their own branding and they have their own ideas. This is the person who was leading this was named Katie Mottram, and she also had this thing called Mend the Gap, right? And I bring this up because one of the insights that I've had recently is that we have this idea that there's this like divide, there's this big hole, there's this missing thing, and what are we going to do about this big gap? What are we going to do? How are we going to fill the gap? How are you going to mend the gap? How are you going to build the bridge? And it's sort of like, there's something about that I get from the Taoism, which is like maybe you don't even need to mend the gap. Maybe the gap is there for a reason. You know, have you ever thought of that one? Maybe the gap is like the wheel has a hollow part in the wheel, or the cup has to have an empty part of the cup so it can pour things. So it's necessary for there to be but then, you know, there's another side to this too, which is that in George Orwell's 1984, there's this classic line that's like 2 + 2 = 5, right? And it's like, we all know that 2 + 2 = 4, so where's the missing thing that's in 5? So everybody knows that it doesn't add up, that there's something missing, right? And that I rewatched Knives Out with my mom for Mother's Day. Because the thing is, like, I don't know, I'm into all this art stuff, these arty things that have to do with the soul and whatever, and my mom just likes more straight up, like, detective fiction, right? And so, like, the detective fiction, I like the Knives Out because if you're paying attention, you can read different things into it at different levels, right? But one of the things that I like, there's this line from Benoit Blanc in Knives Out where he was talking about the case was like the perfect donut, right? Where there's like the hole in the donut, and then which is the missing thing, like to mend the gap. Where's the hole in the donut, right? And he's like, this isn't even necessarily a there's not that there's a hole in the donut. There's actually a whole other donut in the hole with its own hole, right? And it's like oh man, those crows are going at it today, aren't they? So there's this thing that's like the whole thing about the 2 + 2 = 5 and the donut that's actually in the donut hole. Then another thing I've been watching, one of the guys that has been a huge influence on me, who's helped me get to where I am, who's been a major influence in my spiritual journey, has been Alejandro Jodorowsky, right? Jodorowsky. And I have to admit, I'm not a Spanish-speaking guy, so I cannot, like, I followed him on Facebook, but most of his stuff that's in Spanish, I'm like just a white Canadian guy, and I don't speak Spanish at all, so most of it I don't get, right? But I do get he writes these jokes or whatever, and if I hit the translate button, I can use the automatic translate into English, which is not even that good. I can still get what he's saying, right? And one of the jokes Jodorowsky made, which is really fitting for this particular transit, is this one about a guy who's doing a border crossing, right? And that they're asking him, do you have anything to declare, right? And he's like, oh, like nothing, I just have my sandwich here. And then between his sandwich, he's got 2 loaves of bread, and he's got a massive elephant between his sandwich. And they're like, well, there's the law is that you have to declare any animals. And he's like, this is my sandwich. What, a man can't put what he wants between 2 loaves of bread? What, isn't this a free country? Like, this is, but the whole point is that, like, there's this thing about, like, I was thinking there's a lot of New Agers who talk about how they're like getting a download, right? They're like, I'm receiving a download, and like they don't actually tell you what the download is, right? But I think with this sort of Pluto-Jupiter thing going on, it's like you gotta be you receive a download. There's certain things where it's like getting a zipped file, a compressed file. It's fair that you might get a download, but it's only happening at a certain level that you don't know how to unpack this download, right? And that maybe some downloads you don't need to unpack, right? Maybe some zip files are just better to be left compressed, right, and not unpacked, right? But the thing is about this is that I have this thing where it's like there's a way that you can just fold it all in there and say it's all peace and love, but it's like you've got a massive elephant that you're putting in your sandwich trying to pass it off as a ham sandwich. You know, and it's not really gonna fly, right? Because especially if you got like a Benoit Blanc on the case, it's like, oh man. Another thing that I was thinking is this whole thing about Nina Simone and Sinnerman, right? Which is like the elephant between the two pieces of bread, which is like, and then Pluto. I think Pluto. I don't know if anybody else has this association, but I associate Pluto with the card that says Judgment, right? And it's like I think a lot of people might post things about how, you know, to avoid judgment or to say that like no judgment here, judgment free, no, or like that. Like I saw a friend of mine on Facebook, like I got this in on a tea thing before, right? Where it was like you're drinking herbal tea and it says the difference between a weed and a flower is judgment. And this guy posted that, but he said, yeah, but let's get rid of the word judgment and just say perception, right? And it's like, yeah, okay, but I mean, the thing, to me, it kind of smells funny in a way, right? The people who are really keen to just throw the word judgment out the window, to me, it's because, especially if you've heard some stories about certain people, then it's like, you know, I can see why you might want to throw the word judgment out the window and just live in a world where judgment doesn't exist. And you get, you know, and it's all peace and love and nobody judges you. And then, but it was neat. It's the whole thing about like why there's a lot of people who don't like Christianity because they don't like this thing about sin, right? But like there's like Nina Simone says, you know, you can run to the river and the river's boiling, and you can run to the sea, right? And you can run to the devil, but where are you gonna run to, right? Like if you got something, it's that you actually feel in your heart you've done wrong, that you have whether you want to make it into the Christian model of sin or there's a truth where it is what it is, and like you can throw out your ideologies about like, you know, approving of judgment or saying no judgment, but it doesn't. The truth is still the truth regardless. And you can say we're not going to go into the mind and we're not going to do this, but at the, you know, you're not going to run from the truth in silence either. If there's something to be, the whole point is that when you go into a meditative silence, if anything, that just dredges it up more than anything else, right? You know, and I have to admit, though, that maybe there's my own stuff. Like I've been being confronted with my own. I've been going through my own process, right? That's what Pluto often stands for, is like stuff getting dredged up from the depths, right? And that this kind of transit. I'm like my chart. I have to admit, my chart's going to get hit by this. My chart's getting the works recently, and I'm going to be going through this too. I'm on the hook for it. And I mean, you know, maybe there are certain truths that I can't face yet either. And so it's like, you know, judge not lest ye be judged and all that, right? Of course. So it's like the whole, yeah, I don't know. You get what I'm saying though. And these loud scary crows crowing away there. Yeah, maybe I should talk about that too, because you know, I've been studying Greek mythology as Hillman recommended, right? And one of the things that I found, which I thought was interesting, was that we often associate crows with death, right? But if you go by what the Greek mythology was talking about, when there's this whole thing where the gods get chased into animal form, right? That if the humans' own animal instinct and all this kind of stuff, because humans cannot see the divine directly, or that they don't have a spiritual process of dealing with the divine, then the divine takes on animal forms. Or that the way that, you know, you could also be in, you know, in Native American spirituality, they were dealing with the same archetypes in animal forms. I don't, I'm not claiming to be any expert on what the native people of this area believed about crows and eagles and all this kind of stuff. But it's funny that, like, we think about the god Apollo as being all about, like, like these ivory pillars and, like, the sun and the light of logic and reason and all this kind of stuff. But apparently the crow was the animal of Apollo, the black crow. And that Apollo didn't just stand for the light, he stood as the darkness as well. And that the crows are ambassadors of Apollo. So there's something about that we can honor the crows cawing away in the background as the ambassadors of Apollo, bringing light into the situation, right? I'm just looking through my notes because I had a bunch of different ideas here, right? So, like, Pluto, like, no, that's the whole thing about. Often we have this image that comes from whatever our background, our colonial European background of light casting out the corruption, right? And that Pluto stands for the corruption, the corrupt thing that hides in the darkness, and that the light comes to find the corrupt thing in the darkness. And the thing about, I just there's this thing that's like, when I was younger, I didn't do that much traveling, but at one point in time, I went traveling in Eastern Europe, and I tried talking to the people there to get an idea of what it was like to be an Eastern European, and the kind of corruption that happened at a political level, right? And, here in Canada, there's a lot of people who might put up stickers or flags that say, "Fuck Trudeau," right? And I don't know if I want to get into this because, I'm starting to think that as my spiritual process develops, that, that maybe the opinions of the politics, that there's something that, you're working with something that's at a deeper level that transcends all these political boundaries and political divisions. But, at some basic level, I can agree, sure, fuck Trudeau. But the point is, like, politics is just, like, the reason why you say fuck Trudeau. Some people may have different reasons for disliking though. It's not even, at this point in time, it's like, it's not even that everybody can probably agree that we don't like politicians, but that's almost like a problem in a way that, like, we live in a culture of people where nobody trusts politicians. Everybody thinks they're corrupt. Nobody wants to be a politician. And we have this expectation that in order to be a leader, in order to be a politician, you have to be perfect, you have to be clean, you have to have all your ducks in a row, basically, right? And when I was talking to this guy in Romania, and he was saying, it's like, sure, the politicians in the West are corrupt, but they wear white gloves, right? They do it. You put on this sort of, you do this little ceremony and you put on white gloves and you pretend everything's not corrupt. But here in Romania, they don't. The gloves are off, right? And it's almost like, it reminds me almost of like hockey, right? Like in hockey, when you have a hockey fight, the guys take their hockey gloves off and they fight with, just, it's kind of funny. What other sport, like in basketball, if you even just push a guy, it's a foul. In hockey, they have full on fist fights and stuff like that in Canada, and that's just the part of the culture around here, right? I mean, okay, the NHL has more, American NHL teams are, there's more hockey in America than Canada because you guys have a bigger population down there. But I consider it to be more of a Canadian sport, more part of the Canadian identity, right? But this thing about white gloves and the gloves coming off and all this kind of stuff and the corruption. Oh boy, where was I going to go with this? Oh yeah, there's this one thing, there's this story that I heard on the news. I have to admit, I live with my family, I live with my mom, and I live with my sister, and I don't watch the news very often, but sometimes I'm just laying on the couch at night and I can overhear my mom's TV, and this was a story that I just overheard on the TV. I didn't go looking for it, but it was like, I think it really goes well with this certain transit of the Mars-Jupiter-Pluto T-Square. And it relates to this thing about Jupiter as a teacher, right? And, I mean, I don't know I don't know if I have what it's cut out to be a teacher myself, like an actual, like, go and teach kids in high school or elementary school or all that, but we're having a teacher shortage, right? We have a shortage of teachers in the school system. And there's a story about a woman who is working in the special needs class or something like that, or like it's some sort of, I don't know exactly what kind of class it was, but she was like a teacher's assistant or something like that, or a teacher, and she was in trouble with the school district because not only was she working as a teacher's assistant, or she also had an OnlyFans page, right? And there's a sort of controversy around this issue where people are saying that teachers don't even get paid enough for what they're doing, so that they have to do work on the side, especially maybe a teacher's assistant doesn't get paid as much as a teacher. So in order to pay the bills, people are forced into doing things like, whether you could say, oh, well, you don't have to have an OnlyFans page, you could do it some other way or something like that. But regardless, this is the society we live in. We live in a society, there's that, society, well, whatever, right? Society, man! Okay, well, this is how we have got it set up. We've got a kind of a liberal system where apparently things like OnlyFans and making money off of, homemade pornography or whatever you want to call it, or sex work online, it's apparently cool by the laws of our liberal democracy. But we're still, the people get their panties in a twist or whatever if somebody is a teacher's assistant doing that work on the side while teaching teenagers in high school. Now, there's this whole thing about, conservative values and all this kind of stuff, and as my process goes on, I'm starting to maybe let me just put it this way, that at some theoretical level, we can say that, like, there's nothing wrong with sex work and there's nothing wrong with doing this stuff, but there's a certain maturity that's involved with that, right? And you have to consider that in a high school environment, you're dealing with teenage boys going through puberty, all hormonal and stuff like that. And I don't know if you guys remember what being in high school was like, but it's not the most mature situation at all, right? And it could be, like, you can see, put two and two together of why people might be uncomfortable. That if I was in high school as a teenage boy and there was some teacher that was like a female teacher who had an OnlyFans page, all the teenage boys in the locker room would be talking about it. And or it would and then people would be like, if people's minds start going, okay, what's next? Is this teacher going to start prostituting her out to the kids? And like, this is what I'm talking about when I brought up Lord of the Flies before, right? But we really have this situation where I feel like we've got ahead of ourselves, where we have this whole apparatus where anybody has access to the internet and can do all these things, and these are the laws, and then we haven't really added up. We haven't really put together what are the ramifications of all this stuff, right? And I don't know, this whole thing about, I'm not making... I had a conversation with somebody about this stuff about, like, sex work and that, and whether or not it's like a woman empowering herself to make her own choices about how she makes money, or being exploited by pimps in poverty and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, this is the whole thing, that on one hand, if you just isolate the topic of sex work, right, just like we're going to cut it out from all the circumstances and just say sex work is charging money for some kind of service, right? But you can do that, right? But if you don't take consideration of the whole circumstance of it, you could have people are getting exploited because they're just doing it to survive and they have no other option, and it's hell for them. Or you could have somebody who is, like, in a more comfortable circumstance, just doing it to make money on the side, and they don't have any problem with it. But it could be what they're doing, it could be the same thing, but it's not so much the thing they're doing, but the big picture. It's the big picture circumstance. And, this is maybe an uncomfortable topic for some people, but Jupiter deals with the big picture circumstance, the big picture mentality, and Pluto is like the devil in the details, right? And that often, the thing is, like, often it's the devil in the details of the specific circumstances that where this corruption comes in. It's not in some broad idea of like painting with broad strokes that this is either good or bad in any circumstance. That maybe these things can oscillate between being good or bad, right? But it's like, it becomes really complicated, because how are you going to regulate this with like, are all teachers going to be banned from having OnlyFans pages, right? And this is, we've got a teacher shortage, right? This is one of the things that but I'm still working out where how to be politically neutral if I'm dealing with the unity of all things, right? That everything's united. We're all one. Peace, love, unity, respect, and transcending political divisions and all that. But I have a certain kind of beef here with the red pill mentality, as I understand it. Because as I understand it, there's this whole thing between not red pill where people are like, instead of what we're going to do with our libido is we're going to put our libido into this some sort of project or whatever, and we're going to make money, and we're going to move ourselves up in our social status, and we're going to get the wife of our dreams, and we're going to have kids and realize that. And then, but the thing is, it's like we have a situation where tons of people are having kids, but who's going to teach these kids? And if what's driving what you're doing in life is your desire center, that I'm going to sublimate my desires instead of going around just like having instant gratification from having sex with whoever is the most attractive. I'm going to do like where do you go? Like, I just feel like we've got the situation where like nobody wants to become a teacher, because you're going to be like, all the kids are going to be online, and they're going to know what your business is. You know what? I don't have to spell it out or whatever, right? Like when I was a teenager, all the kids, like, I could just overhear all the kids, to each teacher, they're like, oh yeah, this science teacher is a creep. He likes to look at girls. This English teacher is a creep. Oh, all the teachers are pedophiles. Well, guess what, guys? We don't have any teachers anymore. What the fuck are you gonna do now? Have a robot? We'll just have an AI teach you, right? Because a computer doesn't have a sex drive. We'll just, so problem solved. We don't have human teachers anymore. We'll just have robots teach our kids, and then we just pretty soon we've got the Matrix, where your whole libidinal drive, you're just like a battery pod fueling the technocracy machine, or whatever you people like to call it. That's what I got in my mind for this video. Hope you like it. You can like or describe, or you can dislike and unsubscribe and fuck off for all I care. I don't care. Go for it. Whatever.